What is education, and why is education important? Is it important? After all, what's the real purpose of getting educated about anything? We so frequently take education and the process for learning in general totally for granted. Not only that, but the ways in which we think. How we've gone about structuring our own consciousness itself has largely remained unchanged for a long, long time. So how do we literally change our minds? Can we reconfigure our own ways of thinking? And if so, how? Join Dr. Joseph Atman, the founder of one of the world's most revolutionary educational centers, Middletree, and award-winning broadcaster Tammy Trujillo for Educate Everyone, and explore the mysteries of our own consciousness and the education we implement in order for it to be what it is.
Our guest on this episode of Educate Everyone is Monique Zubiate. She's a wife, mother, and grandmother, and currently a student at Loma Linda University, where she's studying health information technology and medical coding. She serves as a program assistant at Barfield Elementary School in Pomona, California, through Middletree, where she supports student and staff in creating a positive learning environment.
So, Monique, you run our program as our program assistant at Barfield, which is one of our partnerships in Pomona, California. Tell us a little bit about that. How's that going over there?
I think we're doing a great job. I started the year new to Barfield and new to the site and the front office and Miss Sierra, and it was a little scary coming from Roosevelt, where I was very comfortable. And I think from the beginning till now, it's beautiful. We work very well together. I love our kiddos. The site, it works really well for all of us. You know, our site, it's smaller. I love that we're close where our classrooms are.
And when you say smaller, I mean, because most of those programs have like 100 plus students in them.
I mean, where we're located on site. Some of our other schools, you have to walk very far. I love that we're just all right next to each other. All our classrooms are right next to each other. I can pop in and out of each class within seconds. Just like, hey, hi, how's it going? What do you need? You know, we're all in our own little area. I love it.
Sure. And the program, I mean, it's supposed to be, obviously we have students separated by grade level and all that, but the proximity of it, that's beneficial for you guys to kind of collaborate as a team?
Absolutely. So, for example, on Wednesdays, we do rotations. And that's literally where we take each class and they rotate into the class right next door. And because we're right next door to each other, it's perfect. It's like a little train. We just gather all the kids from one class and move them to the next class. And each class has a fun activity. It's usually messy, like slime and bubbles and water play and crayons and chalk. And we just move them from room to room. We call it rotation. And I think that would be really hard to do if we were farther out within the campus. So that's why it really works for us. Or I said, it's easy for me to also pop in from one classroom to another to assist.
Yeah, and that's an experience because you're working mostly with elementary schoolers. So that's an experience for students that they normally don't get at that age in regular school, right? Like, because you're normally with one homeschool teacher, and then you might go to gym class or PE, or you might go to art class, although a lot of those things are kind of fallen by the wayside, modern education. But so that's kind of a unique experience for a lot of students to be able to go from experience to experience, teacher to teacher, thing to thing, right? Activity to activity.
It's great for all the leaders because we get to know every single person. We know every child versus if the child was only in their class all evening or all afternoon till pickup with just one or two leaders. Now they've gotten to know everyone, every single leader. So we know exactly who we're talking about. Sixth grade leader will know exactly what kindergartner I'm talking about, or if they see them on campus, we're like, hey, so it really brings us more into a unity, and I think it works really well for us.
Yeah, and I think there's something to that because the more people that can be involved in education, especially for for students, well, really students of any age, but I feel like sometimes we do like education almost backwards in this country. Like everybody kind of in elementary school, again, you've got that one teacher and that person's with you the whole time. And yet it kind of takes a village to raise students. And then when, you're more mature, you get more specialized. So I sometimes wonder if it wouldn't make more sense to almost do it backwards and have more of a high school environment for elementary school students where you are shuttling around from thing to thing. And maybe you're with the same group all the time, but you're getting more exposure to more teachers, to more experiences, to more things. And you kind of find out who maybe you might be as a student, and more people throughout the day kind of interact with you and touch upon you as a student and could evaluate you and help steer you on a particular path. Right. So, and then when you get into high school, it's like, okay, this student is an artist, right? This student's potentially an engineer. And then you could actually shrink the sizes of students and then give them more particular attention. I don't know. It's just an idea. And we'd kick that around at Middle Tree, like in our early stages about, should we set our program up like that? But the program that you're doing, it's an after school program, just to be clear. So you're meeting with students after school. I mean, would you say it's kind of a school day part 2 or not really? How do you think it's the same or different, or like, and what's the benefit to that?
I feel it's just a funner day at school, right? It's the funner part of the day. We assist with homework and we still have our snack time. So we get in our lines and then we walk to snack and we have our snack. We clean up snack. We get back in line. I feel like it's very much the same as what they do during the day, like for lunch. And we do enrichment. So yesterday was Earth Day. The kids made nature bracelets. They watched a YouTube video about recycling. They colored worksheets. So they're still learning, but it's just more activity. They went outside and did a nature scavenger hunt. I just feel like it's the fun part of the day. You're still learning. You're still in a classroom setting, but we have more flexibility. And I think that the kids really enjoy it.
Yeah, and I think it kind of hits on something important that sometimes, again, the traditional school system sort of lacks, just given the way that it's set up, in that you guys are able to, because you've got the flexibility of being in this after-school program, you guys are able to interact with students, get them to be learning by doing something, right? Get their hands dirty with stuff. And my question about that is, like, why can't we do that in a normal school day from your perspective? And maybe we do it, but I think teachers have so much that they are required to focus on. And so much that they have to disseminate to students, where you guys are a little bit more free. There's not as much pressure. And I'm wondering if there's not something to that. There's not like necessarily like standards that you're having to hit. Not that standards are necessarily bad per se, because you should have goals and all of that, and there should be certain things that everybody learns, but you guys kind of don't have a ton of pressure to necessarily shuttle students or get them to a certain point or get them exposure to certain things. You can kind of go at your own pace and just sort of whatever happens. And I'm wondering if there isn't something to that.
I homeschooled my daughters. I have 3 daughters, and I homeschooled them for 7 years. The way I treat this program is how I taught my children. And we did a lot of fun. We went to museums. We did a lot of outdoor play. All our science projects were outside. We purchased kits online. We watched YouTube. YouTube is very informative. We watched a lot of YouTube videos to learn things. And we took art classes in the middle of the week, and my children are wonderful students. And I feel like you can have a lot of play, a lot more freedom and flexibility, and still be a really great student. So I feel like a lot of the kids, when they come from their classrooms in the afternoon, they're just so drained and they're tired. I mean, I believe in structure. Yes, we need to classroom volume, remaining in our seat. We're not allowing them to run all over the place and everything, but they do love to be outside and they love to just have more play and more fun. And we also allow them to choose activities. I think giving them the freedom is also very nice too, because when I was in a classroom, we did journals where we traveled around the world. So I would take a poll and say, okay, where do you want to travel to this week? And everyone would take a poll and we'd pick a country and we'd learn about the food. I found when I got them involved and it was just like, what do you want to do? How do you think we should study this country or this place? And so when you got them involved, they were all for it. But having them sit there and telling them, you have to do this way, you cannot move, speak, or, they feel very restrained. So after school, sometimes we have to get them outside to run around before we can put them in a classroom because they just need to breathe.
So you find generally that students are coming to you unenergized, kind of dragging their feet in general?
Yes.
Pretty much every day, and most students?
Not our young ones. Our kinders are always active.
Sure,
They are always active.
They get nap time, though, so there's that.
Yeah.
And so do they have a similar energy when they leave you guys in the after-school program?
No, they're much more energized. No. In fact, we have several students who don't want to go home. I call their names and they're like, no, don't sign me out. Don't sign me out. They don't want, and mom's like, I gotta go home. I gotta make dinner. So, and I always feel so like, oh, they love us. They're so excited. One of my favorite moments when I get on campus is I could be walking across the campus to our room and I can hear someone from the field from across the way going, Miss Monique, like waving. And they're just like, oh my, I can't even see who it is. I'm just like, who is that? But I'm still waving. So, I love that. They're so excited to see us. It makes us feel good, we're doing good things there.
The question is well, how does our traditional school system better replicate? And it's not necessarily what Middle Tree is doing per se, but there's something formulaic in what's happening in maybe some of those after-school programs that, again, I wonder, what can traditional schooling take from that and learn from it and try and give to students in general. Because I think as I'm kind of processing this, my thought on it is that if you're generally exhausted, you're rubbing up against something that, well, obviously it doesn't energize you. It drains you. It takes away energy. And anything that takes away energy from you is likely something that is being forced upon you or you're having to really struggle with. Whereas you can do something that's really exhilarating, that really does expend a lot of energy and yet can be invigorated by it, can be energized by it, right? You can go play a whole football game or whatever, and you're in overtime and you still got the same amount of energy, maybe even more, because the stakes are ratcheted up, at some point during the game. And maybe afterwards you're tired, but you're still given energy by it. Because I know that feeling of students, when I'm around them after school, a lot of them are kind of, dragging their feet. It's a long day for students. And then, of course, the after-school program makes it all that much longer, which is a couple hours. Generally it's from after school. I mean, you guys don't get out of there till what, 6 o'clock, 6:30?
6:15, yeah.
6:15, yeah. So
we also like to prepare them. We had a whole week where we were just making slime, literally the whole week. Sierra and I were just like, let's just get messy. Let's just have a lot of fun. What can we do? We had bubbles and kinetic sand and paint. And so we got them really amped, okay, this week is our messy week. And they just couldn't wait. And every day they would show up, even before they got to the class, they would see me and they're like, okay, what are we doing today? What are we making today? Just so excited for the day. So I think that also gets them excited and pumped for the day. So giving them a schedule and telling them what to look forward to. But also we give them 45 minutes to an hour to work on homework. And in order for them to participate in these things, we really need them to, okay, friends, we really need you to sit down.
There's a carrot there.
Yes. You don't have homework? Okay, let's read a book. I have some worksheets for you. You can draw. So we do give the opportunity to also finish their homework, but they do know that we have a lot of fun. And a lot of our leaders, they're young. And they have a lot of energy, unlike myself. But
Well, you're young.
I'm young, but they're like half my age. And so I love when they're out there playing with them. And I'm like, yes,
Totally.
go. I can't run.
Yeah. Because I think a lot of people, if you're listening to the conversation and going, well, of course students think that's fun. They get to just hang out and play and make slime all day. That's a big component of it. But there is that academic portion too. So I wonder if also students don't see in our after school program, again, there is that carrot that we dangle out in front of people. You do your work, hit your obligations, then the reward of that is that you get to participate in the rest of the day. Again, I'm wondering if traditional system that we've set up within the traditional model of schooling, everybody's doing the same thing the whole time, regardless, in elementary school anyways. I wonder if there are other ways to better incentivize students being able to get through their work, or at least give an effort. Because I always say that it doesn't really matter what the results are. You got to get students to give an effort. And if you get them excited about giving the effort and forgetting about the result, if you allow for that failure, well then when you're not focused on the result and you're encouraging the effort and you're praising the effort, regardless of whether or not the concept or what they're studying lands, then what's going to follow eventually? Well, if you get students excited about just giving it their best try and mucking it up and failing, and they don't have any fear of that, well, then guess what follows? Well, the effort then translates into a result eventually, but it's on their time frame. It's up to students. I think getting students to give an effort, and maybe, there's a way that we're incentivizing it, that there's something to that and that works for students. But I think if we could better incentivize stuff for students on the whole, that we'd see a better performance and better results in general.
Absolutely. When we, for example, the journaling we did, a lot of my third and fourth graders were worried about spelling or complete sentences. And I'm like, I'm not even worried about that. If you're really trying and you're getting those words down on that paper and you're excited to show me what you have, I'm not going to sit there and critique it. I promise. Thank you for participating. Thank you for taking it serious and trying. And absolutely, I tell my kids that all the time. It is the effort. And that also really drives self-esteem. When they show me something they've done and I'm like at Barfield and I'm just like, I'm so proud of you. This is wonderful. It's great. And it may not be an A or their projects they make. They all have to carry them to our after school program, right? They make these big projects and they have to take them home, so they all land up in our rooms. And I'm like, oh my God, what did you make? That's so great, So,
yeah. But like in an art class, clearly once that painting is painted or the drawing's drawn, there are clearly going to be some students who are better at it than others. Or you're going to see that picture of a vase with flowers in it or whatever. It's going to look different, depending on who's drawing it. There are going to be some who, it looks really good. There are going to be others who, maybe not so much. But nobody really cares, per se, right? They're all just there and excited to do it. And we're not focused on what that result is. How do you translate that in an academic setting as well? Because, again, academics are so focused on that result, on that answer.
Right.
So it's
if a child shows up every day to school, willing, excited, and giving their best effort, that should be the A.
There you go.
We all learn different and we all excel at different points of our life. I have a son who did not do well in school at all. He had an IEP and all the way up through high school, he was so I can never be good at school. And he just graduated last year with his master's. So, it took him almost his whole young adult life before he realized, okay, I found something that I like. Okay, I'm giving school a shot. And we told him, you will find it. You will. Don't let elementary school say that you're not going to be something. But he did. He showed up every day and he really tried. And so I think that's what we're lacking, honestly. Because I have children and I've seen the results of it come later. But it came.
Yeah, and I was in a similar situation. I tell that story all the time about my own sort of personal journey and struggle with that as a younger student. Same exact thing. So, again, it's kind of goes back to how do you find and evoke a student's passion at a young age and spark that thirst for knowledge and that relationship with their own intellectual capacity or creative capacity or whatever it is that sort of gets them fired up and turned on about things that are important to them, and see that light bulb kind of go off over their head, or sparkle on, I should say, over their head. And we clearly just don't do that enough in the traditional system. And it's like, well, how do you evoke that more?
Well, you know what I love about our program with Middle Tree is all the vendors we get after school. All these children have all these things available to them, you know, tennis, hip hop, film production. Like, oh my gosh, we actually have a fourth grader right now who wrote a script, and all of us there are like, did you read this? This is amazing. And then the film production guy, before he leaves, he's like, that kid is so... I was like, yes, he would have never figured out that he's actually really good at that if he didn't have these opportunities. So theater, dance, music, which I know they do provide in school, but maybe a more of a narrow path, like a more driven to what is your passion? Let's figure this out now and go that route. I think that would be amazing if they started that younger.
There are a number of different problems, I think, that we're facing right now in education, but they all come back to the way that we actually have set up the system. And I've got a whole giant diatribe that I won't launch into right now. That well, you've heard me talk about it, Monique, about how education is a system. I've already kind of fleshed that out here on this podcast, so I won't necessarily go over the whole thing, but it really all goes back to the fact that education is a system. And when we set up this model as an actual system, then we're always trying to, again, just obtain a result. We're forgetting about the effort. We're forgetting about the individual. That's why systems are put into place in the first place. Any system is there to just get a result. So then we're constantly looking for a result from students rather than caring about who they are as individuals, right? Because we're trying to get them to feed into and work into that particular system. And the system that we have in education is, you know, getting the third grader to move into fourth grade, to move into fifth grade, to move into yada yada till you graduate. And then again, you can kind of forget everything that you learn because you know, you're just using that as a tool and a mechanism to maneuver and navigate and get through that system. So there's no emphasis on actual learning itself within our education system, right? It's just about maneuvering through it and getting, you know, to the next level. We just don't do a great job of evoking passion, finding out who people are. And that's what education, I think, primarily is supposed to do, is to help not only evoke a person's passion, but help someone discover really who and what they are. And I don't know that you're figuring that out in, you know, high school biology class in the way that we're doing it. Nothing against biology, right? You know, a lot of people encounter biology in high school, not picking on biology, but like a lot of people encounter biology in high school and become biologists, maybe. A lot of people are just bored to tears by it. There's a way that we could do this differently. And you got some great teachers. You got so many great teachers. This is not the fault of the individual teachers at all, because they're beholden to this whole system as well.
No, I agree. Like you said, they have to check those boxes.
And I think if you spoke to teachers, and we will do so on this podcast, and I mean, you talk to teachers, I'm sure, pretty regularly out there. I don't know that you get this candid, but I think if you were to, you know, take them out for a drink or something, that they would tell you that they're frequently burned by the administrative bureaucracy and the red tape, and all that comes from, you know, this giant machine that we have within the educational system, right? Public education is a government entity. You know, you could argue that government entities aren't always as effective or as efficient as some other organizations are. Now, I'm not saying we get rid of public education, period, but I think this just all goes back to the fact that we at some point need to reimagine the whole process.
And there's a whole lot more to talk about. So Monique will be back next week to continue this discussion on the next episode of Educate Everyone. And now the Middle Tree Minute.
This is Kristen Hernandez, Middle Tree's executive assistant. A big problem with academics in general is that a lot of the things we learn in school don't always relate to real life situations. So ask yourself, how can you bring lessons to life for your student? Can you turn something that you cook or bake into a math problem? Can you have your student write a letter to a loved one who maybe needs more outside contact? If you bring the lesson to life by translating it into something they can see and do in everyday situations, it's a great way to plug the learning gap.
And that's this week's Middle Tree Minute. And now a quick look into Dr. Atman's book, A Philosophical War. So, Joe, first thing I want to ask you about the book is, well, why did you write it?
Well, I wrote it because I couldn't write it for my dissertation. I wanted to do something that was much closer to this book for my dissertation when I was in grad school. But I was told that it was a great line, I'll never forget it, by one of the folks on my committee, that what I was proposing was a blurry vision of a promised land behind the moon.
Ouch.
And again, great line. I think you and I have kind of talked about that exact experience. So I was like, okay, well, I need to then kind of more toe the academic line. So I did, right? I wrote about things that were already academically familiar to me. But this, I wanted to branch out. And what was kind of cool about this one was that even though I didn't really realize it at that time, was that it was kind of the catalyst, the impetus for, or at least that like foundational framework for developing Middle Tree. At the time when I wrote it, I was just writing it to write it, but then it came to sort of influence all these other things that I was thinking about doing professionally, because the work itself is about how we structure our consciousness and how that consciousness comes to then, of course, inform who we are as people, as individuals, as a society, and basically everything that we do in life and the ways that we interact. You know, there's so many things that influence us as human beings and as individual consciousness and as larger kind of collective consciousnesses. Religion, culture, the way that society itself understands itself or understands that question of what it is to be a human being. But the thing that really most influences that consciousness, the way that we think, of course, is the education system itself. But part of my project here was to go back and posit the question, how did we come to have the kind of consciousness that we currently do? There were different choices that we could have made in order to restructure the consciousness that we have. So why weren't those choices made? Well, you don't think about it generally. You just have the kind of consciousness that you do, not just as an individual, but as human beings. We all sort of experience things in similar ways. That said, you go to different cultures, you go to different countries, you talk with people who are not from where you're from, and there is a different approach. There is a different way to structure this whole being of human being. And that's not something that we think about very often, but there is a different way to have potentially set this whole thing up. That is a different way to have structured our consciousness. And so, of course, the way that we structured our consciousness then comes to impact the way that we pass that consciousness on to other generations. And how the mechanism we've utilized to do that largely is through the education system.
You can find a link to Joe's book in the show notes for this episode.
Thank you for listening to Educate Everyone with Dr. Joseph Atman and Tammy Trujillo. Join us each week as we explore the inner workings of our own minds and the educational system which builds and supports it. Also, check out our website at middletree.org to see what opportunities Middle Tree's programs can offer you or your student. And join us on social media. If you have any questions you'd like Dr. Atman to answer, please leave them on a post or send us a message, and you may hear them answered on the next episode of Educate Everyone. Until then, thanks for tuning in.